Margaret Chen's hands trembled as she reached for her morning coffee, the ceramic mug slipping slightly before she caught it with what appeared to be painful effort. The young barista at Corner Cafe watched with sympathetic eyes as the elderly woman struggled with the simple task, her fingers seemingly stiff and uncooperative. "Let me help you with that, Mrs. Chen," offered Jamie, the college student who worked the morning shift. She had grown fond of the quiet woman who came in every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:30 a.m., always ordering the same thing: black coffee, no sugar, and a plain bagel. "Thank you, dear," Margaret replied, her voice carrying the slight rasp of someone in her 70s. "These old hands just don't work like they used to." But as Jamie turned to grab napkins, Margaret's grip on the coffee mug shifted almost imperceptibly. Her fingers, which had appeared arthritic and weak just moments before, now held the ceramic with the precise control of someone who could crush it into powder or use it as a projectile weapon. The transformation lasted less than 2 seconds. Before she resumed her careful, pained grasp. Margaret had been living this lie for 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Every morning, she wrapped her hands in specialized compression gloves that created the appearance of swollen joints. Every afternoon, she practiced the subtle movements that suggested stiffness and pain. Every evening, she reminded herself that Eleanor Vance was dead, and Margaret Chen, retired librarian with arthritis, was all that remained. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Margaret's entire body tensed. 3 men in dark suits had entered, their eyes scanning the small space with the systematic precision she recognized all too well. Her coffee mug didn't tremble now. Her hands were perfectly still as she evaluated threats, exit routes, and potential weapons within reach. The first man's jacket hung slightly loose on the left side shoulder holster. The second favored his right leg, old injury, probably a bullet wound to the thigh that had healed improperly. The third kept his hands visible and relaxed, which made him the most dangerous. A professional who didn't need to touch his weapon to be ready to use it. They weren't here for coffee. Margaret's mind shifted into calculations she hadn't needed for over 3 years. Distance to the back exit, 12 feet, blocked by 2 tables and the college student who was now wiping down the espresso machine. Distance to the front door, 8 feet, but it would put her directly in their line of sight. Number of civilians, 4, including Jamie. Acceptable casualties, 0. The men approached the counter, and she heard the first one speak to Jamie in accented English. Russian, specifically from the Moscow region, if she was reading his vocal patterns correctly. Her hands began their practiced tremor again as she slowly reached for her purse. "Excuse me," the man said, turning toward her. "You are Margaret Chen, yes? We have some questions." Margaret looked up with the confused expression of an elderly woman interrupted during her morning routine. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" But her right hand was already moving inside her purse, fingers finding the concealed compartment where she kept the ceramic knife untraceable by metal detectors, sharp enough to sever a carotid artery in one precise motion. The 7th way, blade between the 2nd and 3rd ribs, angled upward at 45 degrees. The man smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Perhaps we could speak privately?" Margaret's thumb found the textured grip of the knife handle. 3 years of careful hiding, of building a new life, of pretending to be someone harmless and forgettable. All of it was about to end because someone, somewhere, had made a connection they shouldn't have been able to make. "I think there's been some mistake," she said, her voice maintaining its elderly quaver even as her mind calculated strike angles and response times. "I'm just here for my coffee." The second man moved slightly to his right, positioning himself to cut off the rear exit. The third remained by the door. Standard triangulation formation. These weren't amateurs. Jamie looked between Margaret and the men, her young face showing the first signs of concern. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Chen?" "Everything's fine, dear," Margaret replied, her arthritic facade never wavering even as she prepared to kill 3 people in less than 10 seconds if necessary. The knife was fully in her grip now, concealed by the angle of her purse and the natural curve of her supposedly painful fingers. The first man took another step closer. "Mrs. Chen, we really must insist." Margaret's coffee mug exploded against his forehead with enough force to drop him instantly. The 9th way, improvised projectile, aimed at the temporal region where the skull is thinnest. As he fell, her left hand was already drawing the ceramic blade while her right hand grabbed the metal napkin dispenser from the table. The second man reached for his gun, but Margaret's throw put the napkin dispenser into his solar plexus before his fingers found the grip. The 3rd way, disruption of the diaphragm causing temporary paralysis of the breathing reflex. The third man had his weapon out, but Margaret was already moving, using Jamie as inadvertent cover as she rolled behind the counter. The ceramic knife left her hand in a perfect arc, catching him just below the ear. The 1st way, severance of the carotid artery with a lateral approach. Jamie screamed. Margaret rose from behind the counter, her hands no longer trembling, her movements fluid and deadly. 3 men down in exactly 7 seconds. The other café. Patrons were frozen in shock, their minds unable to process what they just witnessed. "Call 911, Margaret said quietly, her elderly voice now carrying an edge of command that hadn't been there moments before. "Tell them there's been an incident." But she already knew it was too late. If these 3 had found her, others would follow. Eleanor Vance had been the best elimination specialist the agency had ever trained, fluent in 12 different ways to kill with nothing but her hands and whatever objects happened to be available. Margaret Chen, the arthritic librarian, had just died along with the 3 men on the cafe floor. Eleanor Vance was back. 3 hours after the incident at Corner Cafe, Eleanor sat in an FBI interrogation room, her hands cuffed to a metal table. She had resumed her arthritic persona, wincing as she shifted in the uncomfortable chair. The compression gloves were gone, confiscated as evidence, but she had spent years learning to make her joints appear swollen through subtle positioning and controlled muscle tension. Special Agent David Torres sat across from her, a thick file open between them. He was younger than she had expected, probably early 30s, with intelligent eyes that missed very little. His partner, Agent Sarah Kim, leaned against the wall behind him, studying Eleanor with unconcealed fascination. "Mrs. Chen," Torres began, his voice professionally neutral. "Or should I call you something else?" Eleanor looked at him with the confused expression of an elderly woman who had just experienced a traumatic event. "I don't understand. Those men attacked me." "I was just defending myself." Agent Kim stepped forward. "Ma'am, you killed 3 armed professionals in 7 seconds using a coffee mug, a napkin dispenser, and a ceramic knife. That's not exactly typical self-defense." "I used to teach self-defense classes," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying just the right amount of defensive uncertainty. "At the community center. Years ago, before my arthritis got so bad." Torres opened the file and pulled out a photograph. It was old, probably 15 years, showing a woman in her 50s with dark hair and cold eyes. The resemblance was unmistakable despite the carefully applied aging makeup and prosthetics Eleanor had been using. "This is Eleanor Vance," Torres said quietly. "She was a specialist for a classified government program that officially doesn't exist. She disappeared 12 years ago after her handler was killed and the program was shut down. She was presumed dead." Eleanor studied the photograph as if seeing it for the first time. "I'm sorry. I don't know who that is. My name is Margaret Chen. I moved here from Portland after my husband died." "Your husband who never existed," Agent Kim said. "We checked. There's no record of a Margaret Chen living in Portland, no marriage certificate, no death certificate for a husband named Robert Chen. Your entire identity was created 3 years ago by someone who knew exactly how to build a bulletproof cover." Torres leaned back in his chair. The 3 men you killed were Russian operatives, professional killers. They had been in the country for less than 48 hours, which means someone gave them very specific information about where to find you very recently. This got Eleanor's attention. Her elderly facade slipped for just a moment, a flicker of the predator beneath the surface. What kind of information? The kind that suggests someone in the intelligence community has been tracking you all along. Torres said, someone who knows who you really are and decided it was time to clean up loose ends. Eleanor felt a familiar chill. After her handler Marcus Webb had been murdered 12 years ago, she had assumed the program's enemies would come for her next. She had spent 2 years constantly moving, changing identities, looking over her shoulder. When no one came, she had gradually allowed herself to believe she was truly free. 3 years ago, she had finally stopped running and created Margaret Chen, the perfect invisible person. Elderly, infirm, forgettable. She had chosen a small city where nothing important ever happened, where no one would think to look for. Ghost. But someone had been watching. Someone had been patient. Agent Kim placed another photograph on the table. This one showed a man in his 60s with silver hair and expensive suit. Eleanor recognized him immediately, though she kept her expression neutral. Do you know this man? Kim asked. No, Eleanor lied. This is Alexander Kozlov. He runs a private security firm that specializes in what they call problem resolution. He's also the man who sent those 3 Russians to find you. Torres added, Kozlov worked for the SVR Russian Foreign Intelligence until 5 years ago. Then he went private, taking several contracts from various organized crime syndicates. But according to our sources, his current client is someone much more interesting. He placed a 3rd photograph on the table. Eleanor's blood went cold. Director James Harrison looked exactly as she remembered him, sharp suit, predator's smile. Eyes like a shark. He had been her ultimate supervisor in the program, the man who decided which targets lived and which died. She had trusted him completely until the moment she learned he had ordered Marcus's death. Harrison's been dead for 12 years, Eleanor said carefully. Killed in the same attack that destroyed the program. That's what everyone was supposed to think, Torres said. But Harrison staged his own death. He's been operating a private network ever since, using former program assets for his own purposes. We think he's been systematically eliminating everyone who knew about the original program. Agent Kim sat down across from Eleanor. The 3 Russians weren't there to ask questions. They were there to kill you. But someone miscalculated your abilities. Eleanor's mind was racing. Harrison was alive. After 12 years of believing her former director was dead, he was not only alive but actively hunting former assets. The careful life she had built as Margaret Chen was already over. There was no going back to that identity now. The question was what came next. What do you want from me? She asked, dropping some of her elderly pretense. Torres closed the file. We want you to help us find Harrison. And we want you to help us stop him before he kills the remaining survivors of your program. In exchange for? In exchange for a real identity. Not a cover story, not a false life, a genuine fresh start with full government protection. You help us end this, and Eleanor Vance can finally stay dead. Eleanor considered the offer. The alternative was to run again, to spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next team of killers to find her. But working with the FBI meant stepping back into a world she had tried desperately to leave behind. It meant using skills she had hoped never to need again. There's something you should know, she said finally. If Harrison is really alive, he's not just eliminating assets randomly, he's building something. The program created 27 specialists over its 15-year run. 12 of them died in the field. 3 died after the program shut down. At least we thought they died. That leaves 12 unaccounted for, Agent Kim frowned. 12 specialists trained in elimination techniques. Not just elimination, Eleanor corrected. Each specialist was trained in 12 different methods of killing using only hands and improvised weapons. That's why they called it the 12 Ways program. We were living weapons designed to operate anywhere, anytime, without leaving evidence. Torres whistled softly. So Harrison potentially has access to 12 of the most dangerous assassins ever trained. Had access, Eleanor said grimly. If he's been eliminating them, it's because they refuse to work for him. The question is how many he's already killed, and how many might have agreed to join him. A knock on the interrogation room door interrupted them. Another agent entered and whispered something to Torres, who looked increasingly grave as he listened. What is it? Agent Kim asked. Torres looked at Eleanor. We just got word from our field office in Denver. They found a body this morning. Woman in her 50s who had been living under the name Patricia Williams. Neighbors described her as a quiet person with bad arthritis who kept to herself. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs. Patricia Williams was the cover identity Sarah Mills had chosen when the program shut down. Sarah had been one of the best specializing in infiltration and close-quarters combat. How did she die? Eleanor asked, though she already suspected. The answer, professional hit. Single shot to the head, but the killer took time to stage it as a home invasion. If our field office hadn't been specifically looking for former program assets, they would have classified it as a random crime. Agent Kim was typing on her laptop. If Harrison has been tracking you for 6 months, why wait until now to make his move? Eleanor considered this. Because he needed something from me first. Information, most likely. And he needed me to believe I was safe so I wouldn't run before he was ready. Jamie was staring out the car window, watching familiar streets pass by as they drove away from her life. So this morning at the café, that was all planned? The timing was planned, Eleanor confirmed. But Harrison underestimated how I would react. He expected Margaret Chen to panic, to make mistakes. He didn't expect Eleanor Vance to surface immediately. Torres turned onto a highway on-ramp. Where are we going? Eleanor pulled out a burner phone she had concealed in her jacket. Somewhere we can regroup and figure out our next move. But first, I need to make contact with the other survivors. She dialed a number from memory, waiting as it rang several times before connecting. Maria? Eleanor said when someone answered. It's Ghost, we need to talk. The voice on the other end was female, older, with a slight accent. Ghost? Jesus Christ, we thought you were dead. Harrison's alive and he's hunting assets. Sarah Mills is dead. Patricia Williams is dead. Probably others. There was a long pause. How many does he have with him? Unknown. But he found me this morning, which means he's found you too. I've been expecting this call for 12 years, the voice replied. Where do you want to meet? Eleanor gave her an address, then hung up and turned to Torres. Change of destination. We're going to meet someone who can help us. Agent Kim looked concerned. Another former asset? Maria Santos. She goes by Carmen Ruiz now, runs a small accounting firm in the suburbs. But she was one of the program's infiltration specialists. Torres adjusted their route. How do you know she's not working for Harrison? Eleanor smiled. Because Maria Santos would rather die than work for the man who killed her husband. Jamie had been listening to this conversation with growing confusion. I don't understand any of this. Government programs, assets, specialists. What exactly did you people do? Eleanor looked at her directly. We killed people, Jamie. People who couldn't be touched by conventional law enforcement. Drug lords who were buying protection from corrupt politicians. Arms dealers who were selling weapons to terrorists. War criminals who had escaped justice. You were assassins. We were tools, Eleanor corrected. Very precise, very effective tools. The program gave us targets and we eliminated them. We didn't ask questions about politics or justification. We just did the job. Agent Kim turned around. Again, What changed your mind? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, remembering the day everything fell apart. I learned that sometimes the people giving us targets were the real criminals. My handler, Marcus Webb, discovered that Director Harrison was using the program for personal gain, eliminating business rivals, political enemies, anyone who threatened his private interests. Torres was navigating through increasingly suburban streets, and Harrison killed him for it. Marcus called me the night before he died. Told me he had evidence that would expose Harrison's corruption. He was supposed to meet with Internal Affairs the next morning. Eleanor's voice was flat, emotionless. They found his body that evening. Single shot to the head, made to look like a mugging. Jamie was beginning to understand the scope of what she had become involved in. So you've been hiding from your own government? From parts of it, Eleanor said. The program was disbanded after Marcus's death, but the people who created it still had influence. I couldn't trust anyone in the intelligence community. Until now, Agent Torres said. Eleanor nodded. Until now. Because Harrison made a mistake. He came after me directly instead of just leaving me buried. That tells me he's desperate. They pulled into the parking lot of a small strip mall. Agent Kim scanned the area for potential threats, while Torres checked his radio for any updates from federal backup units. Which building? Torres asked. Eleanor pointed to a modest office with a sign reading, Ruiz Accounting Services. Maria's expecting us, but she'd be cautious. Let me go in first. Agent Kim objected. That's not tactically sound. We should clear the building first. Maria Santos could kill all three of you before you cleared the front door, Eleanor said. Matter-of-factly. Trust me on this one. She got out of the car and walked toward the office, her movements relaxed but alert. Jamie watched through the car window as Eleanor knocked on the door in a specific pattern, 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. The door opened, revealing a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. She looked like exactly what she claimed to be, a suburban accountant who helped small businesses with their taxes. But Jamie noticed the way she scanned the parking lot before stepping aside to let Eleanor enter. And she noticed that the woman's right hand never moved far from what was probably a concealed weapon. After a few minutes, Eleanor reappeared and waved them over. Inside the office, Maria Santos had transformed from suburban accountant to military professional. Her posture was straighter, her eyes sharper, and she studied Torres and Kim with the practiced assessment of someone trained to identify threats. You brought federal agents to my place of business, Maria said to Eleanor. I brought allies, Eleanor replied. Harrison's people found me through the FBI, which means he has sources inside the bureau. Agent Kim looked alarmed. What kind of sources? Maria answered. The kind that have been feeding him information about asset locations for the past year. We've lost 6 people, Ghost. All of them were contacted by federal agents in the weeks before they died. Torres felt the implications of this. You're saying there's a mole in the FBI? I'm saying Harrison has been using federal resources to track down program survivors, Maria said. Which means you walked into the same trap that killed Sarah and Patricia. Eleanor nodded grimly. Except Harrison made one critical error. He assumed I would stay in character as Margaret Chen long enough for his people to take me quietly. Instead, you reminded everyone why they called you the Ghost of Budapest, Maria said with what might have been admiration. Jamie raised her hand tentatively. Excuse me, but what's the Ghost of Budapest? Eleanor and Maria exchanged glances. Finally, Eleanor answered, it was a mission I completed 8 years ago. A Romanian arms dealer was selling weapons to several terrorist organizations. He had protection from corrupt officials in 3 different countries, so conventional law enforcement couldn't touch him. What did you do? Jamie asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. I eliminated him and his entire organization in a single night. 14 targets across 6 locations in Budapest. No witnesses, no evidence, no way to trace it back to any government agency. Maria added, Eleanor completed the entire operation using nothing but improvised weapons and her hands. No guns, no explosives, no equipment that could be traced. Agent. Torres was staring at Eleanor with new understanding. That's why Harrison wants you specifically. You're not just another asset. You're the most effective killer the program ever produced. Eleanor shrugged. I was good at my job, but that was a long time ago. Not that long, Maria said. This morning you took out 3 Russian specialists. In 7 seconds, Agent Kim was taking notes on her laptop. If Harrison has been tracking assets for a year, how many survivors are left? Maria consulted a tablet she had pulled from her desk. When the program ended, 12 assets were unaccounted for. In the past year, we've lost Sarah Mills, Patricia Williams, Michael Chun, no relation to your cover identity, David Park, Lisa Rodriguez, and Thomas Mitchell. Eleanor did the math. That leaves 6, including us. 5, Maria corrected. James Hartford contacted me 3 weeks ago. Said he was going underground, couldn't trust anyone. Haven't heard from him since. So, Harrison potentially has control of 7 former assets, Torres said. Eleanor shook her head. No. If Harrison had 7 specialists working for him, he wouldn't need to hunt down the holdouts. He would have sent them after us. Then where are they? Agent Kim asked. Maria answered. Dead. Harrison's been eliminating assets who refuse to work for him and recruiting those who agree. But I think the recruitment phase is over, Eleanor understood. He's moving to the final phase of whatever operation he's been planning. Which means he needs the archive. Jamie had been following this conversation with growing dread. How many people are we talking about? How many people is Harrison planning to kill? Eleanor and Maria looked at each other, and Jamie saw something pass between them, a shared knowledge of just how dangerous their former director had been. The archive contains detailed records of every target the program eliminated over 15 years, Eleanor said slowly. It also contains records of everyone who ever gave us orders, authorized missions, or provided intelligence. How many names? Torres asked. Maria consulted her tablet again. 437 confirmed eliminations. Over 2,000 individuals who had knowledge of or involvement with program operations. Agent Kim stopped typing. 2,000 people? Politicians, military officers, intelligence officials, law enforcement commanders. Eleanor listed everyone who knew the program existed. Torres was beginning to understand the scope of Harrison's plan. He's not just trying to cover up his past crimes. He's planning to eliminate everyone who could expose the program's existence. Eleanor nodded. And once he has the archive, he'll have the names and locations of every person on that list. But surely most of these people are protected, Agent Kim said. High-ranking officials have security details, classified locations. Maria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Agent Kim, the 12 Ways program was designed specifically to eliminate targets that conventional assassination methods couldn't reach. Security details, classified locations, witness protection programs. None of that matters when your assassin can kill with a paperclip and a coffee mug. Eleanor stood up and began pacing the small office. Harrison's timeline is accelerating. The attack on the FBI building this morning wasn't just about confirming my identity, it was a test run. He wanted to see how federal security would respond to a 12 Ways infiltration. And? Torres asked. And now he knows that conventional security measures are useless against specialists, which means he's ready to move against larger targets. Agent Kim was back to typing frantically. We need to warn the people on that list. Warn them of what? Eleanor asked. That sometime in the next few days, someone might approach them with a briefcase, or offer them a cup of coffee, or ask for directions. That any random stranger could be a professional killer trained to eliminate them without leaving evidence. Maria added, "The only way to stop Harrison is to find him before he gets the archive. And the only way to find him is to give him what he wants." Jamie looked confused. "Which is?" Eleanor smiled grimly. "Me." Torres shook his head. "Absolutely not. We're not using you as bait." "You're not using me as anything," Eleanor replied. "I'm offering to do what needs to be done. Harrison wants Eleanor Vance. Fine, but he's going to get all of Eleanor Vance, not just the parts he's expecting." She turned to Maria. "I need you to contact the remaining survivors. Tell them Harrison is making his final move and it's time to choose sides. And if they choose Harrison?" Eleanor's expression was cold. "Then they'll die with him." Agent Kim looked up from her laptop. "I'm getting reports of unusual federal activities in 3 major cities. Large security deployments, high-ranking officials being moved to secure locations. Harrison's moving faster than we thought," Eleanor said. "Which means we need to move faster too." Torres stood up. "What's the plan?" Eleanor walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. "The plan is to stop pretending that Margaret Chen ever existed. Eleanor Vance is going hunting." She turned back to the group. "But first, we need to get Jamie somewhere safe. Because once I surface completely, Harrison's going to use every resource he has to take me down." Maria was already reaching for her phone. "I know a place. Off the grid, completely secure." Jamie finally spoke up. "Wait, don't I get a say in this?" Everyone looked at her, this young college student who had been pulled into a deadly game she never knew existed. "You want me to hide while you all go off to fight some kind of shadow war," Jamie continued. "But I'm the one who saw what happened this morning. I'm the witness Harrison wants to eliminate." Eleanor nodded. "Which is exactly why you need to disappear until this is over." "But what if you don't win?" Jamie asked quietly. "What if Harrison kills all of you? How long do I stay hidden? How do I know when it's safe to come out?" It was a good question, and Eleanor didn't have a good answer. Torres filled the silence. "The FBI will provide long-term protection if necessary." "The same FBI that has a mole feeding information to Harrison?" Jamie asked. Eleanor looked at this young woman who had served her coffee for 3 years, who had been kind to a lonely old lady, who was now facing the possibility that her entire life might be over because she had witnessed 7 seconds of violence. "You're right," Eleanor said finally. "You deserve better than being hidden away while other people decide your fate." She sat down across from Jamie. "So here's what I'm offering. Come with us. Help us stop Harrison. Be an active part of ending this instead of a passive victim waiting for someone else to save you." Agent Kim objected. "That's completely inappropriate. She's a civilian." "So was I when the program recruited me," Eleanor replied. "And she's already seen more real combat than most federal agents." Jamie considered this. "What would I do?" "I'm not trained for any of this," Eleanor smiled. "You'd be my secret weapon. Because Harrison is expecting Eleanor Vance, the professional killer. He's not expecting Eleanor Vance with a civilian partner who sees the world differently." Torres looked skeptical. "How is that an advantage?" "Because," Eleanor said, "the 12 Ways program taught us to think like predators. But Jamie thinks like prey. And sometimes prey sees things that predators miss." Maria was nodding slowly. "It could work. Harrison's been planning for every contingency he can imagine. But he can't plan for something genuinely unexpected." Eleanor looked directly at Jamie. "It's your choice. Go into hiding and hope we succeed, or help us make sure we succeed." Jamie thought about her morning routine at the café, about her classes and her part-time job and her normal life that now seemed as fragile as tissue paper. "If I help you," she said, "do I get my life back when it's over?" Eleanor was honest. "I don't know. But I promise you'll have a life worth living." Jamie nodded. "Then I'm in." Agent Torres checked his watch. "If we're doing this, we need to move soon. Harrison will expect us to run, to try to hide." If we're going to surprise him, we need to do it before he adjusts his strategy. Eleanor was already moving toward the door. Then let's go hunting. As they prepared to leave Maria's office, Agent Kim received a call on her secure phone. She listened for a moment, her expression growing increasingly grave. "What is it?" Torres asked. Kim hung up. "We just got word from Washington. 3 high-ranking Pentagon officials were found dead in their homes this morning. All 3 were killed by what appears to be professional assassination techniques." Eleanor stopped moving. "Harrison's not waiting for the archive. He's already started eliminating targets." Maria consulted her tablet. "If he's moving against Pentagon officials, he must have partial access to the archive already." Torres was reaching for his own phone. "I need to contact my superiors, get protective details assigned to potential targets." "It's too late for that," Eleanor said quietly. "Harrison has 12-year-old intelligence about federal security procedures. He knows exactly how protective details operate, what their weaknesses are, how to defeat them." She looked around the room at her unlikely allies, 2 federal agents, a hidden accountant who used to be a killer, and a college student who served coffee for a living. "The only advantage we have is that Harrison still thinks like it's 12 years ago. He's planning for the Eleanor Vance he remembers, not the one who learned to be patient by pretending to have arthritis for 3 years." Agent Kim was gathering her equipment. "So what do we do?" Eleanor Vance smiled, and for the first time since the cafe incident, she looked genuinely pleased. "We remind Harrison why the program shut down instead of just transferring Eleanor Vance to a different assignment." Director James Harrison stood in the penthouse office of a downtown high-rise, looking out at the city where Eleanor Vance had been hiding for 3 years. The view was spectacular, glass and steel, reaching toward the horizon. Millions of people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their reality was built on secrets that men like Harrison had spent decades protecting. Behind him, his aide Alexander Kozlov reviewed reports from the morning's operations. The Russian's voice was carefully neutral as he delivered the bad news. "The cafe team is dead. All 3 operatives eliminated by the target using improvised weapons. Harrison didn't turn from the window. And the FBI building? Successful infiltration. Minimal casualties on our side. But the target was extracted by federal agents before we could complete the objective." "Meaning?" Kozlov hesitated. "Meaning Eleanor Vance is now fully operational and working with Bureau resources." Harrison finally turned around. At 62, he still projected the authority that had made him one of the most feared intelligence directors in recent history. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, his eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Show me the footage from the cafe," he said. Kozlov activated a wall-mounted display that showed security camera video from Corner Cafe. The image quality was poor, but the action was clear enough. An elderly woman transforming into a killing machine in the space of 7 seconds. Harrison watched the sequence 3 times before speaking. "She's better than she was 12 years ago. Sir, look at the efficiency. No wasted motion, no hesitation, perfect spatial awareness. Eleanor Vance was always the best the program produced, but this..." He gestured at the screen. "This is beyond what she was capable of when she worked for us." Kozlov reviewed his notes. "How is that possible? She's been underground for 12 years, living as a civilian." Harrison smiled, but it was the expression of a predator recognizing another predator. "She's been practicing. All this time we thought she was hiding. She was actually preparing." He walked to his desk and opened a file containing photographs and documents. "What do we know about her?" "Cover identity? Margaret Chen, retired librarian, moved from Portland 3 years ago. Lived alone, few social contacts, reported to have arthritis that limited her mobility." "Reported by whom?" Kozlov checked his tablet. Medical records show regular visits to a rheumatologist. Pharmacy records show consistent prescriptions for anti-inflammatory medications. Neighbors confirmed observing difficulty with manual tasks. Harrison studied a photograph of Margaret Chen taken by surveillance teams over the past 6 months. She created the perfect invisible identity. Someone so ordinary, so forgettable, that no one would look twice. But we found her. No, we found her because she wanted to be found. Look at the timing. Harrison pulled out a timeline chart. 6 months ago, we identified the Margaret Chen identity. 4 months ago, we confirmed the connection to Eleanor Vance. 2 months ago, we began active surveillance. This morning, she eliminated our extraction team. Kozlov was beginning to understand. She was using herself as bait. She was waiting for us to make our move so she could make hers. Harrison closed the file, which means she knows more about our operation than we thought. A secure phone on his desk rang. Harrison answered on the second ring. Report. The voice on the other end was professional, clipped. Phase 2 complete. Pentagon targets eliminated. No complications. Evidence? Clean eliminations. Local law enforcement will classify them as home invasion murders. Federal investigators will find nothing to connect them to our operation. Harrison hung up and turned back to Kozlov. Eleanor wants to play? Fine, but she's about to learn that she's not the only one who's been preparing for this day. He moved to a different wall. Display that showed a map of the United States with dozens of red markers. Activate the sleeper assets. All of them. Kozlov looked at the map with concern. Sir, that's 43 operatives. If we deploy them all simultaneously. Eleanor Vance just declared war on us, Harrison interrupted. She may be the best individual asset the program ever produced, but she's still just one person. We have an army. The map began updating as Kozlov sent activation codes to cells across the country. Each red marker represented a former program asset who had agreed to work for Harrison's private network. Most had been recruited through a combination of financial incentives and subtle coercion threats to expose their past activities. Leverage over family members, promises of protection from other intelligence agencies. What are their orders? Kozlov asked. Harrison returned to the window, watching traffic flow through the streets below. Find Eleanor Vance. Capture her alive if possible, but don't take unnecessary risks. And eliminate anyone who helps her, including federal agents? Especially federal agents. The FBI made a mistake involving themselves in this situation. Now they're going to learn what happens when civilians try to interfere with professional operations. Kozlov was typing rapidly, transmitting orders to sleeper cells. Sir, deploying this many assets will attract significant attention from law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Harrison laughed. Alexander, in 6 hours we're going to have the archive. Once we control that information, we'll own half the intelligence community. A little attention from law enforcement is the least of our concerns. The archive. Harrison had been searching for its location for 12 years, ever since Marcus Webb had hidden it somewhere before his death. Webb had been too smart for his own good. He had created multiple redundant security systems, hidden backup locations, encrypted access codes that required multiple keys to unlock. But Webb had made one critical error. He had trusted Eleanor Vance with one of those keys. Harrison's phone rang again. This time, the news wasn't as positive. Sir, we have a problem. Our federal contact reports that the target has made contact with other program survivors. At least 2 confirmed assets are now working with FBI agents. Harrison felt his first moment of concern. Eleanor Vance working alone was a manageable threat. Eleanor Vance coordinating with other program survivors was exponentially more dangerous. Which assets? Maria Santos, currently operating under the Identity Carmen Ruiz, James Hartford, status unknown but presumed active. Harrison knew both names. Santos had been the program's best infiltration specialist, capable of assuming any identity, penetrating any organization, gathering intelligence from sources that didn't even know they were being compromised. Hartford had been a demolitions expert with a talent for making deaths look accidental. If Eleanor was building a team, double the security around the archive location, Harrison ordered, and activate the Washington assets immediately. If Eleanor thinks she can expose our operation, she's about to discover what happens when someone threatens national security. Kozlov looked up from his tablet. Sir, activating the Washington assets will require direct confrontation with federal law enforcement. Are you certain you want to escalate to that level? Harrison considered this. For 12 years, he had operated in the shadows, using intermediaries and cutouts to maintain distance from his operations. Direct action against federal agents would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But Eleanor Vance had already crossed that line for him. The moment she revealed her true identity to FBI agents, she had forced his hand. Alexander, do you know why the 12 Ways program was really shut down? The official report cited budget constraints and changing operational priorities. Harrison shook his head. The program was shut down because Eleanor Vance had become too effective. She could eliminate any target, anywhere, anytime, without leaving evidence. She had transcended the limitations of conventional assassination techniques. He walked back to his desk and pulled out another file, this one much older, containing mission reports from Eleanor's operational peak. The problem with creating the perfect weapon is that eventually, someone realizes it's too dangerous to control. Eleanor Vance wasn't just an asset, she was a strategic liability. Because if she ever decided to target the people who controlled her, instead of the people they assigned her to eliminate, Kozlov understood. She could destroy the entire intelligence infrastructure, which is exactly what she's planning to do now. The archive contains enough evidence to expose every classified operation the program ever conducted. If Eleanor gets access to that information and decides to make it public. Harrison didn't need to finish the sentence. Both men understood the implications. 12 years of carefully constructed cover stories would collapse. Hundreds of current and former intelligence officials would face prosecution. Decades of clandestine operations would be exposed to public scrutiny. So we stop her, Kozlov said. Simply, no. Harrison's voice was cold. We don't stop her. We make sure she never existed in the first place. He activated another display that showed detailed files on everyone who had interacted with Eleanor Vance since she surfaced that morning. FBI agents Torres and Kim, the college student Jamie Thompson, Maria Santos, any federal officials who had been briefed on the situation. Full termination protocol, Harrison said. Everyone who knows Eleanor Vance is alive dies. Everyone who has seen evidence of her activities dies. Everyone who could testify about today's events dies. Kozlov stared at the list of names. Sir, this is a significant escalation. We're talking about eliminating federal agents, civilian witnesses. We're talking about protecting national security, Harrison corrected. Eleanor Vance is a rogue asset with access to classified information. Anyone who aids her or provides her with resources is by definition a threat to ongoing operations. The older man walked to a safe built into the office wall and removed a small metal briefcase. Inside were authorization codes for operations that officially didn't exist: black budgets, sleeper assets, elimination protocols that had been developed for scenarios exactly like this one. Activate the Omega Protocol, Harrison said, handing Kozlov a coded transmitter. Full spectrum asset. Deployment. No restrictions on collateral damage. Kozlov hesitated before taking the device. Sir, once we cross this line. Harrison finally turned around. At 62, He still projected the authority that had made him one of the most feared intelligence directors in recent history. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, his eyes sharp. Enough to cut glass. "Show me the footage from the café," he said. Kozlov activated a wall-mounted display that showed security camera video from Corner Café. The image quality was poor, but the action was clear enough. An elderly woman transforming into a killing machine in the space of 7 seconds. Harrison watched the sequence 3 times before speaking. "She's better than she was 12 years ago, sir. Look at the efficiency. No wasted motion, no hesitation, perfect spatial awareness. Eleanor Vance was always the best the program produced, but this..." He gestured at the screen. "This is beyond what she was capable of when she worked for us." Kozlov reviewed his notes. "How is that possible? She's been underground for 12 years, living as a civilian." Harrison smiled, but it was the expression of a predator recognizing another predator. "She's been practicing. All this time we thought she was hiding. She was actually preparing." He walked to his desk and opened a file containing photographs and documents. "What do we know about her?" "Cover identity? Margaret Chen, retired librarian, moved from Portland 3 years ago. Lived alone, few social contacts, reported to have arthritis that limited her mobility." "Reported by whom?" Kozlov checked his tablet. "Medical records show regular visits. To a rheumatologist. Pharmacy records show consistent prescriptions for anti-inflammatory medications. Neighbors confirmed observing difficulty with manual tasks." Harrison studied a photograph of Margaret Chen taken by surveillance teams over the past 6 months. She created the perfect invisible identity. Someone so ordinary, so forgettable, that no one would look twice. "But we found her. No, we found her because she wanted to be found. Look at the timing." Harrison pulled out a timeline chart. 6 months ago, we identified the Margaret Chen identity. 4 months ago, we confirmed the connection to Eleanor Vance. 2 months ago, we began active surveillance. This morning, she eliminated our extraction team. Kozlov was beginning to understand. She was using herself as bait. She was waiting for us to make our move so she could make hers. Harrison closed the file. "Which means she knows more about our operation than we thought." A secure phone on his desk rang. Harrison answered on the second ring. "Report." The voice on the other end was professional, clipped. "Phase 2 complete. Pentagon targets eliminated. No complications. Evidence? Clean eliminations. Local law enforcement will classify them as home invasion murders. Federal investigators will find nothing to connect them to our operation." Harrison hung up and turned back to Kozlov. "Eleanor wants to play? Fine, but she's about to learn that she's not the only one who's been preparing for this day." He moved to a different wall. Display that showed a map of the United States with dozens of red markers. "Activate the sleeper assets, all of them." Kozlov looked at the map with concern. "Sir, that's 43 operatives. If we deploy them all simultaneously..." "Eleanor Vance just declared war on us," Harrison interrupted. "She may be the best individual asset the program ever produced, but she's still just one person. We have an army." The map began updating as Kozlov sent activation codes to cells across the country. Each red marker represented a former program asset who had agreed to work for Harrison's private network. Most had been recruited through a combination of financial incentives and subtle coercion threats to expose their past activities. Leverage over family members, promises of protection from other intelligence agencies. "What are their orders?" Kozlov asked. Harrison returned to the window, watching traffic flow through the streets below. "Find Eleanor Vance. Capture her alive if possible, but don't take unnecessary risks. And eliminate anyone who helps her, including federal agents. Especially federal agents." The FBI made a mistake involving themselves in this situation. Now they're going to learn what happens when civilians try to interfere with professional operations. Kozlov was typing rapidly, transmitting orders to sleeper cells. Sir, deploying this many assets will attract significant attention from law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Harrison laughed. Alexander, in 6 hours we're going to have the archive. Once we control that information, we'll own half the intelligence community. A little attention from law enforcement is the least of our concerns. The archive. Harrison had been searching for its location for 12 years, ever since Marcus Webb had hidden it somewhere before his death. Webb had been too smart for his own good. He had created multiple redundant security systems, hidden backup locations, encrypted access codes that required multiple keys to unlock. But Webb had made one critical error. He had trusted Eleanor Vance with one of those keys. Harrison's phone rang again. This time the news wasn't as positive. Sir, we have a problem. Our federal contact reports that the target has made contact with other program survivors. At least 2 confirmed assets are now working with FBI agents. Harrison felt his first moment of concern. Eleanor Vance working alone was a manageable threat. Eleanor Vance coordinating with other program survivors was exponentially more dangerous. Which assets? Maria Santos, currently operating under the identity Carmen Ruiz, James Hartford, status unknown but presumed active. Harrison knew both names. Santos had been the program's best infiltration specialist, capable of assuming any identity, penetrating any organization, gathering intelligence from sources that didn't even know they were being compromised. Hartford had been a demolitions expert with a talent for making deaths look accidental. If Eleanor was building a team, double the security around the archive location, Harrison ordered, and activate the Washington assets immediately. If Eleanor thinks she can expose our operation, she's about to discover what happens when someone threatens national security. Kozlov looked up from his tablet. Sir, activating the Washington assets will require direct confrontation with federal law enforcement. Are you certain you want to escalate to that level? Harrison considered this. For 12 years, he had operated in the shadows, using intermediaries and cutouts to maintain distance from his operations. Direct action against federal agents would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But Eleanor Vance had already crossed that line for him. The moment she revealed her true identity to FBI agents, she had forced his hand. Alexander, do you know why the 12 Ways program was really shut down? The official report cited budget constraints and changing operational priorities. Harrison shook his head. The program was shut down because Eleanor Vance had become too effective. She could eliminate any target, anywhere, anytime, without leaving evidence. She had transcended the limitations of conventional assassination techniques. He walked back to his desk and pulled out another file, this one much older, containing mission reports from Eleanor's operational peak. The problem with creating the perfect weapon is that eventually, someone realizes it's too dangerous to control. Eleanor Vance wasn't just an asset, she was a strategic liability. Because if she ever decided to target the people who controlled her instead of the people they assigned her to eliminate, Kozlov understood. She could destroy the entire intelligence infrastructure, which is exactly what she's planning to do now. The archive contains enough evidence to expose every classified operation the program ever conducted. If Eleanor gets access to that information and decides to make it public... Harrison didn't need to finish the sentence. Both men understood the implications. 12 years of carefully constructed cover stories would collapse. Hundreds of current and former intelligence officials would face prosecution. Decades of clandestine operations would be exposed to public scrutiny. So we stop her, Kozlov said. Simply, no. Harrison's voice was cold. We don't stop her. We make sure she never existed in the first place. He activated another display that showed detailed files on everyone who had interacted with Eleanor Vance since she surfaced that morning. FBI agents Torres and Kim, the college student Jamie Thompson, Maria Santos, any federal officials who had been briefed on the situation. Full termination protocol, Harrison said. Everyone who knows Eleanor Vance is alive dies. Everyone who has seen evidence of her activities dies. Everyone who could testify about today's events dies. Kozlov stared at the list of names. Sir, this is a significant escalation. We're talking about eliminating federal agents, civilian witnesses. We're talking about protecting national security, Harrison corrected. Eleanor Vance is a rogue asset with access to classified information. Anyone who aids her or provides her with resources is by definition a threat to ongoing operations. The older man walked to a safe built into the office wall and removed a small metal briefcase. Inside were authorization codes for operations that officially didn't exist, black budgets, sleeper assets, elimination protocols that had been developed for scenarios exactly like this one. Activate the Omega protocol, Harrison said, handing Kozlov a coded transmitter. Full spectrum asset deployment. No restrictions on collateral damage. Kozlov hesitated before taking the device. Sir, once we cross this line. We crossed the line the moment Eleanor Vance decided to surface, Harrison said firmly. Now we're just dealing with the consequences. As Kozlov began transmitting the Omega protocol authorization, Harrison returned to the window. Somewhere in the city below, Eleanor Vance was planning her next move. She thought she was hunting him, but she had no idea how thoroughly he had prepared for this moment. The 12 Ways program had created 27 highly trained killers over its 15-year run. Harrison now controlled the loyalties of most of the survivors, along with dozens of additional assets recruited from other agencies and private security firms. Eleanor might be the best individual operator the program had ever produced, but she was about to face an army of professionals who had been waiting 12 years for the chance to prove they were better. His secure phone rang a third time. The caller ID showed Archive Security. Harrison smiled as he answered. Tell me, sir, we have movement. Federal vehicles approaching the primary location. Estimate 4 agents, unknown number of additional personnel. Harrison felt a surge of satisfaction. Eleanor was moving faster than he had expected, which meant she was making mistakes. Deploy the on-site security team. Full authorization for lethal force. But remember, Eleanor Vance must be taken alive. Understood, sir. Harrison hung up and turned to Kozlov. Contact our federal asset. I want real-time intelligence on FBI operations related to Eleanor Vance. What if our asset refuses to cooperate? Harrison's smile was predatory. Then our asset becomes another name on the termination list. He looked out at the city one more time, then walked toward the office's private elevator. It's time to end this, Alexander. 12 years ago, Eleanor Vance disappeared because she was afraid of what would happen if she stayed and fought. Today, she's going to learn she was right to be afraid. As the elevator descended toward the parking garage, Harrison reviewed the tactical situation. Eleanor had perhaps 6 hours before his assets reached her location. 6 hours to realize she was completely outmatched. 6 hours to understand that her only choice was surrender or death. But Harrison knew Eleanor Vance better than she knew herself. She wouldn't surrender. She would fight until the very end, using every technique the program had taught her, every skill she had developed during 12 years underground. And when she finally fell, Harrison would be there to collect the archive. Access codes from her body. The elevator reached the garage level, where an armored car was waiting with a full security detail. Harrison climbed into the back seat and gave the driver an address, a location Eleanor Vance would never find until it was too late. Because while Eleanor had been preparing for this confrontation, Harrison had been preparing for war. Meanwhile, across the city, Eleanor Vance was sitting in the back of Agent Torres's car, studying satellite photos of what appeared to be an ordinary warehouse complex on the outskirts of town. "That's it," she said quietly. "That's where Harrison is keeping the archive." Agent Kim looked at the photos skeptically. "How can you be sure?" Eleanor pointed to specific details in the images. Security patterns, vehicle movements, architectural modifications. "I helped design the original security protocols for archive storage facilities." Jamie leaned over to look at the photos. "It just looks like a warehouse to me." "That's the point," Maria said from the front passenger seat. "The archive was designed to be hidden in plain sight, somewhere that wouldn't attract attention from casual observation." Torres was driving toward the warehouse district, following a route that would give them multiple approach options. "What kind of security are we expecting?" Eleanor studied the images more carefully. Standard protocol would be 12 to 15 guards, multiple redundant alarm systems, automated defense measures if anyone tries to breach the archive storage area. "A non-standard protocol?" Agent Kim asked. Eleanor's expression was grim. "If Harrison's using Omega Protocol authorization, he could have 40 or 50 assets protecting that facility, plus whatever technological improvements he's made over the past 12 years. Jamie was beginning to understand the scope of what they were attempting. "So we're outnumbered at least 10 to 1, walking into a heavily fortified facility to steal information from people who kill for a living." "That's about right," Eleanor confirmed. "And our plan is?" Eleanor looked at Jamie with something that might have been affection. "Our plan is to do something Harrison won't expect." She turned to Torres. "I need you to contact your superiors and request immediate backup. At least 20 agents, full tactical support." Torres reached for his radio, but Eleanor stopped him. "Don't. Use secure channels. Use normal FBI radio frequencies." Agent Kim understood immediately. "You want Harrison to intercept the transmission. I want Harrison to know exactly where we're going and how many people we're bringing with us," Eleanor confirmed. "Because while he's preparing to repel a full federal assault." She smiled, and Jamie finally understood why people had called her the Ghost of Budapest. "We're going to walk in the front door," on her laptop. "I'm cross-referencing known aliases for other program survivors. If Harrison is systematically hunting them." Her screen filled with search results, and her face went pale. "We have 3 more deaths in the past 6 months, all in different states. All women living alone, all reported to have mobility issues or chronic health problems." Eleanor closed her eyes. 4 specialists dead, plus the 3 Russians she had killed that morning. Harrison was moving fast, which meant he was close to whatever endgame he had planned. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "But you need to understand what you're asking." Eleanor Vance wasn't just a specialist. She was the specialist. The others were trained in the 12 ways, but I created half of those techniques. If Harrison wants me dead, it's because I know something that can destroy whatever he's building. Torres reopened his file. "What do you know?" Eleanor's hands were steady now, no trace of the arthritic tremor she had maintained for 3 years. "I know where the other survivors are hiding, and I know Harrison's weakness." She looked directly into Torres's eyes. "But first, you need to get me out of here. If the Russians found me this morning, Harrison knows I'm alive. He'll assume they failed when they don't report back, which means he's already sending the next team." As if summoned by her words, the lights in the interrogation room flickered, then went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Somewhere in the building, an alarm began to sound. Agent Kim had her weapon drawn. "That's not a power failure." Eleanor smiled grimly. "No, that's a professional infiltration team cutting power to disable security systems." Torres was speaking rapidly into his radio, trying to raise building security. Eleanor could hear the tension in the responses. "Multiple breaches, armed Hostiles, agents down. How many? Eleanor asked. At least 6 contacts, Torres replied, his own weapon now in his hands. Eleanor held up her cuffed hands. Then you better uncuff me. Because 6 specialists trained in the 12 ways are more than you can handle with conventional tactics. Agent Kim hesitated. How do we know you won't just disappear the moment we unlock those cuffs? Because, Eleanor said as the sound of automatic weapons fire echoed through the building, Harrison made one critical mistake. He sent his people after me before he killed the witnesses to what happened this morning. The building shook as an explosion rocked the lower floors. What witnesses? Torres asked, fumbling with the handcuff keys. Eleanor's eyes were cold as winter. Janie, the barista who saw me kill 3 people in 7 seconds. She's probably at home right now, traumatized and confused, trying to understand what she witnessed. But she saw through my cover. She saw what I can really do. The cuffs fell away, and Eleanor flexed her hands, no pretense now, just fluid strength. And deadly precision. Harrison doesn't leave witnesses, she continued, which means he's going to kill that girl. And that's something I can't allow. More gunfire closer now. The sound of boots in the hallway. Agent Kim moved to the door, weapon ready. So what's the plan? Eleanor stood, her posture completely transformed from the frail woman who had been brought in that morning. She was Eleanor Vance again, a predator, who had been sleeping for 3 years and was now fully awake. The plan, she said, picking up the metal chair she had been sitting in and testing its weight, is to remind Harrison why the program considered me irreplaceable. The door to the interrogation room exploded inward. 2 figures in tactical gear came through, weapons raised. Eleanor was already moving, the chair becoming a shield that deflected the first burst of gunfire while she closed the distance. The second way, blunt force trauma to the cervical vertebrae, applied with improvised weapon. The first attacker dropped. The second tried to track her movement, but Eleanor was inside his firing arc now. The fifth way, pressure point manipulation, causing temporary paralysis, followed by respiratory failure. 2 specialists down in 4 seconds. Torres and Kim stared at her in amazement. This was what Eleanor Vance had been capable of in her prime, a living weapon that moved like poetry and killed like mathematics. We need to get out of here, Eleanor said, picking up one of the fallen weapons and checking its magazine. But first, we're going to Jamie's apartment. Agent Kim was still processing what she had just witnessed. You can't be serious. We need to get to a secure location. The most secure location is wherever I am, Eleanor replied, because I'm not running anymore. Harrison wants the 12 Ways program to stay dead. Fine, but he's going to learn why they called me the Ghost of Budapest. The lights came back on, and the alarms stopped. Torres's radio crackled to life with damage reports, 6 agents wounded, 3 dead, multiple security breaches. But the attackers had withdrawn as suddenly as they had arrived. Eleanor wasn't surprised. Harrison's people had gotten what they came for, confirmation that she was alive and in FBI custody. The attack had been a probe, not a full assault. They would be back with more people and better intelligence. But Eleanor Vance had spent 12 years preparing for this moment, even while pretending to be Margaret Chen. Every morning coffee run, every grocery store visit, every mundane interaction with neighbors had been rehearsed with an escape route in mind. She had been ready for this day since the moment she went underground. Torres holstered his weapon. All right, Eleanor, we do this your way. But once we secure the witness, we're going to need a plan for finding Harrison. Eleanor smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was completely genuine. I don't need to find Harrison. He's going to come to me. She walked toward the destroyed door, stepping over debris and bodies with practiced ease. Because I have something he wants more than my death. I have the location of the archive. Agent Kim followed her into the hallway. What's the archive? Eleanor paused, looking back at the two FBI agents who were about to become her partners in a war that had been 12 years in the making. "The archive," she said quietly, "is where the program kept records of every mission, every target, every government official who ever used our services. It's enough evidence to bring down half the intelligence community and expose operations that are supposed to remain classified for the next 50 years. Torres understood immediately. Harrison's not just eliminating assets. He's trying to find the archive. "And he thinks I know where it is," Eleanor confirmed, "which I do. The question is whether we can get there before he figures out he doesn't need to capture me alive." They reached the building's main entrance, where emergency vehicles were arriving and paramedics were treating wounded agents. Eleanor scanned the crowd, her trained eye identifying potential threats among the chaos. "There," she said, nodding toward a woman in a paramedic uniform who was moving just a little too purposefully through the scene. "Harrison's people are still here, gathering intelligence." Agent Kim started to turn toward the fake paramedic, but Eleanor caught her arm. "Don't. Let them report back that I'm cooperating with federal agents. It will buy us time." They walked toward Torres's unmarked car, Eleanor maintaining the confident posture of someone who had just reclaimed her true identity. But inside, her mind was already calculating odds and probabilities. Jamie Thompson lived alone in a studio apartment 6 blocks from the café. If Harrison's people had identified her as a witness, she had maybe 2 hours before they made their move. After that, her death would be another random crime in a city that was about to become a battlefield. Eleanor settled into the passenger seat as Torres started the engine. Agent Kim sat behind her, still adjusting to the reality that she was working with a legitimate government-trained killer. "One more thing," Eleanor said as they pulled into traffic. "When we get to the girl's apartment, you let me do the talking. She's traumatized, and she's about to learn that everything she thought she knew about the nice old lady with arthritis was a lie." Torres nodded. "What do we tell her?" Eleanor watched the city pass by outside the window. 12 years of hiding. 3 years of careful anonymity, all destroyed in a single morning. Margaret Chen's arthritis had been her perfect cover, who suspects a frail elderly woman of being a professional killer. But cover identities were just tools, and she had never forgotten the most important rule of survival. When the situation changes, change with it. "We tell her the truth," Eleanor said. "That her life is in danger and the only way to protect her is to trust the woman she saw kill 3 people with a coffee mug." The car turned onto Jamie Street, and Eleanor spotted the surveillance immediately. 2 men in a utility van, watching the apartment building entrance. They had arrived first, which meant they were still setting up. That gave her the advantage. "Park around the corner," she told Torres, "and call for backup. This is about to get messy." Agent Kim was already on her radio, requesting additional units. Eleanor checked the borrowed weaponful magazine, 1 round in the chamber. Enough for what she needed to do. "You know," Torres said as he found a parking space, "when I woke up this morning, I thought this was going to be a routine interview." Eleanor laughed, a sound that held no humor whatsoever. "Agent Torres, there's nothing routine about the 12 ways. The program was designed to handle situations that conventional law enforcement couldn't touch. Black ops eliminations, political assassinations, removing threats that couldn't be arrested or prosecuted." She opened the car door and stepped onto the sidewalk. "Today, you're going to see why the government spent 15 years and $200 million creating 27 living weapons." The utility van started moving as Eleanor approached the apartment building. She could see the occupants making the decision to intercept her before she reached the target. Standard procedure when the primary asset becomes aware of surveillance. Eleanor smiled and kept walking. They thought they were hunters closing in on prey. They had no idea the prey was Eleanor Vance. Jamie Thompson sat on her couch, still wearing the café uniform she had put on 12 hours earlier, for what was supposed to be a normal Tuesday morning shift. Her hands shook as she held a cup of chamomile tea, the same tremor that had seemed so natural when Mrs. Chen held her coffee. But this tremor was real. The images kept replaying in her mind. The elderly woman who had seemed so frail and kind, transforming into something deadly and precise. The way the coffee mug had left Mrs. Chen's hand like a guided missile. The casual efficiency with which she had killed 3 armed men. Jamie had given her statement to the police, but she could tell they didn't quite believe her description of what she had witnessed. How could they? She barely believed it herself. A knock at her door made her jump, sloshing tea onto her lap. She wasn't expecting anyone, and after what had happened that morning, every unexpected sound felt like a threat. "Jamie?" A familiar voice called through the door. "It's Mrs. Chen. I need to speak with you." Jamie's blood went cold. The police had said Mrs. Chen was being questioned by federal agents. How was she here? And more importantly, why was she here? Another knock, more insistent this time. "Jamie, please. I know you're frightened, but you're in danger. I'm here to help." Jamie approached the door cautiously, looking through the peephole. The woman standing in the hallway looked like Mrs. Chen, but something was different. Her posture was straighter, her bearing more confident. The trembling hands that had struggled with a coffee mug were now steady as she waited for a response. "How do I know you're really Mrs. Chen?" Jamie called through the door. "Because I'm the one who taught you how to make that perfect foam heart." "In the cappuccinos," the voice replied. "And because I always leave you a $5 tip even though you insist I don't need to." It was her voice, her speech patterns, but there was something else now, an edge of authority that hadn't been there during their morning conversations about the weather and her classes. Jamie unlocked the door, but kept the chain in place, opening it just wide enough to see into the hallway. Mrs. Chen stood there alone, wearing different clothes than she'd had on at the café. Dark jeans, a fitted black sweater, and shoes that looked designed for movement rather than comfort. "Who are you really?" Jamie asked. Mrs. Chen, or whoever she was, met her eyes directly. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I used to work for the government in a classified program. For the past 3 years, I've been hiding, pretending to be Margaret Chen, a retired librarian with arthritis." Jamie stared at her. "You've been lying to me for 3 years?" "Yes, and I'm sorry about that. But right now, those lies are the only thing that kept you alive this long." "What do you mean?" Eleanor glanced down the hallway, checking both directions before answering. "The men who came to the cafe this morning weren't there by accident. They were sent by someone who knows who I really am. And now that they've seen what happened, they're going to assume you know too much." Jamie felt her heart rate increase. Know too much about what? About the fact that Eleanor Vance is still alive. Eleanor's voice was patient but urgent. "There are people who have very good reasons for wanting me dead, and they don't leave witnesses. But I don't know anything. I just work at a café. You saw me kill 3 professional assassins in 7 seconds using improvised weapons." Eleanor said quietly, "That's not something a normal person can do." "Which means I'm not a normal person, which means I'm worth hunting." Jamie was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Finally she asked, "What do you want from me?" "I want to keep you alive. But to do that, you need to trust me and do exactly what I tell you." "And if I don't?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Then you'll probably be dead within the next 2 hours." Jamie looked into Eleanor's eyes and saw something she recognized from that morning at the cafe: absolute certainty. This woman was completely confident in her assessment of the situation, just as she had been completely confident when she had thrown that coffee mug. "Okay," Jamie said, removing the chain and opening the door fully. "What do I need to do?" Eleanor stepped into the apartment and immediately began scanning the space-checking windows, sight lines, potential entry points. Her movements were efficient and professional, Nothing like the careful shuffling of Mrs. Chen. First, you need to pack a bag. One change of clothes, any medications you can't do without, identification, and any cash you have on hand. Nothing. Electronic, no phone, no laptop, no tablets. Jamie started toward her bedroom, then stopped. What about my job, my classes? I'm supposed to work tomorrow. Jamie, Eleanor said gently, your normal life is over. At least until this situation is resolved. The people who are looking for me don't care that you're innocent. They only care that you're a potential security risk. How long? Eleanor was examining the window that faced the street. I don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. But I promise you that I will do everything in my power to make sure you get your life back. Jamie nodded and went to pack. As she gathered her things, she called out, Mrs. Chen, Eleanor, can I ask you something? What? This morning, when you were pretending to have trouble with the coffee ... Was any of it real? The friendship, the conversations, the tips? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. The arthritis was fake. The difficulty with simple tasks was an act. But the friendship was real. You were kind to someone you thought was just a lonely old woman. That meant something to me. Jamie felt tears starting to form. I don't understand how any of this is happening. I know. And I'm sorry you got pulled into it. But I'm going to get you through this safely. Eleanor moved away from the window and began checking the locks on Jamie's front door. How long have you lived here? 2 years, since I started college. Do you know your neighbors well? Not really. The guy next door works nights, so I hardly see him. The woman across the hall has a baby that cries a lot. Why? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She was looking at something on the floor near the door, a small piece of paper that had been slipped underneath. She picked it up and read it, her expression darkening. What is it? Jamie asked, coming out of the bedroom with a packed duffel bag. Eleanor held up the paper. It contained a single line of text. We know you saw what happened at the café. We have questions. When did this arrive? Eleanor asked. Jamie looked at the paper more closely. I don't know. I didn't notice it. Before. Eleanor moved to the window again, this time looking down at the street with more focus. They're here, 2 men in a utility van across the street. They've been watching the building. What do we do? Eleanor checked her watch. We leave, but not the way they expect. She led Jamie to the apartment's small kitchen and opened the window that faced the building's rear courtyard. Can you climb? Jamie looked at the fire escape just outside the window. I think so. Good. We're going down to the basement level, then through the building next door. I have people waiting to help us. As if summoned by her words, Jamie heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment. Slow, deliberate steps. That stopped directly outside her door. Eleanor put a finger to her lips, motioning for silence. The footsteps continued down the hall, but Eleanor didn't relax. They're checking which apartments are occupied, she whispered. Once they confirm you're here, they'll come back with more people. She helped Jamie climb out onto the fire escape, then followed her through the window. The metal stairs were old and creaked under their weight, but they held. As they descended, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled grimly. What? Jamie whispered. The FBI agents I was working with. They're in position to intercept the surveillance team. They reached the basement level, and Eleanor led Jamie through a door that opened into the building's mechanical room. It was dark and filled with the sound of heating equipment and water pipes. This way, Eleanor said, using a small flashlight to navigate between the machinery. They emerged through another door into the basement of the adjacent building, then up a stairway to a side exit that opened onto an alley. Agent Torres was waiting with an unmarked car, engine running. Any problems? Eleanor asked as she and Jamie got into the back seat. 2 Russians in custody, Torres replied. They had enough surveillance equipment to monitor the entire block. Also found these. He handed Eleanor a tablet showing photographs pictures of Jamie leaving her apartment building, entering the café, talking with Mrs. Chen over the past several months. Eleanor studied the images. They've been watching her longer than they've been watching me. This isn't just about eliminating a witness. Agent Kim, who was in the passenger seat, turned around to look at them. What do you mean? Eleanor showed the tablet to Jamie, pointing to specific photographs. Look at the dates. These go back 6 months, long before anyone knew Margaret Chen was Eleanor Vance. Jamie studied the images of herself. But why would anyone be watching me? Eleanor's expression was grim. Because they weren't watching you. They were watching me. Which means someone has known I was alive and hiding for at least 6 months. Torres pulled into traffic, taking a circuitous route through the city. So Harrison didn't just recently discover your location. No, he's been planning this operation for months. The Russians this morning weren't sent to kill me. They were sent to force me out of hiding, to make me react in a way that would confirm my identity. Agent Kim was typing rapidly on her laptop when her screen suddenly went black. Not powered down, completely wiped, as if someone had remotely accessed and erased everything. There. In our systems, she said, staring at the blank screen. Harrison has people inside the bureau. Eleanor wasn't surprised. Harrison spent 15 years building networks within every major intelligence agency. When the program was shut down, those networks didn't disappear, they went underground. Torres's radio crackled with an emergency broadcast. All units, federal building under siege. Multiple armed hostiles, unknown casualties. All available agents respond immediately. Eleanor smiled coldly. He's not just eliminating witnesses anymore. He's eliminating the entire FBI task force that knows I'm alive. Jamie looked between them, fear evident in her voice. How many people is he willing to kill? All of them, Eleanor replied simply. Harrison believes that national security justifies any level of collateral damage. It's how he's rationalized 12 years of murder. Torres was navigating through increasingly heavy traffic, taking side streets to avoid the emergency vehicles heading toward the federal building. Where are we going? Eleanor pulled out a different phone, one Torres hadn't seen her use before. Somewhere Harrison will never think to look. Because we're going to do something completely irrational. She dialed a number and waited. When someone answered, she spoke a single word, Lazarus. The response was immediate. Coordinates? Eleanor gave an address that made Torres do a double take. That's downtown. Right in the middle of the government district. Exactly. Harrison's people will be watching every safe house, every FBI facility, every location where federal agents might take a protected witness. But they won't be watching the one place that's supposed to be completely secure. Agent Kim understood. You're taking us to a classified facility. I'm taking us to the place where the 12 Ways program was originally headquartered. It's been abandoned for 12 years, but the security systems are still active, and I still have access codes. Torres looked skeptical. If it's been abandoned, how do we know Harrison isn't using it? Eleanor smiled. Because Harrison thinks it was destroyed when the program shut down. Marcus Webb made sure of that. He fed false information into the official records, claiming the facility had been demolished and the site redeveloped. 20 minutes later, they were standing in front of what appeared to be an ordinary office building. The lobby directory listed accounting firms, legal offices, and consulting companies. Nothing that would suggest this had once been the nerve center of the most classified assassination program in U.S. history. Eleanor led them to a service elevator that required a special key card. When the doors opened, Jamie saw that the elevator had buttons for floors that didn't appear on the building directory. Sub-basement level 3, Eleanor said, inserting the card into a slot and pressing her thumb to a biometric scanner. The elevator descended much further than 3 floors. When the doors opened, They emerged into a corridor that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Polished steel walls, LED lighting, air that smelled artificially clean. "Welcome to the 12 Ways Training Center," Eleanor said. "This is where they taught 27 people how to kill anyone, anywhere, anytime." The facility was larger than Jamie had imagined. Corridors branched off in multiple directions, leading to training rooms, equipment storage, medical facilities, and what appeared to be living quarters. Agent Kim was documenting everything with her phone's camera. "This place is incredible." "How big is it?" "4 sub-basement levels, each about the size of a city block," Eleanor replied. The program needed space for realistic training scenarios. Room 237 is a perfect replica of a 5-star hotel suite. Room 318 simulates the interior of a commercial airliner. Room 405 recreates the Oval Office. Torres was examining security monitors that showed feeds from cameras throughout the facility. "Are we alone here?" Eleanor checked a master control panel. "Yes, but not for long." "The moment I accessed the elevator, the system sent an alert too. Anyone who still has administrative privileges. Harrison? Among others. We probably have 30 minutes before he figures out where we are and sends people." She led them to a secure office that had once belonged to Marcus Webb. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, computer terminals, and a massive safe that looked like it could withstand a nuclear explosion. "This is what Harrison really wants," Eleanor said, approaching the safe. Marcus Webb's personal archives. Every mission file, every target profile, every government official who ever authorized a 12 Ways elimination. Jamie watched as Eleanor input a complex combination. "That's the archive you mentioned. Part of it." Marcus was paranoid. He kept backups of everything in multiple locations. "But this is the master copy. Names, dates, locations, evidence of every politically motivated assassination the program ever conducted." The safe opened with a heavy mechanical click, revealing rows of data storage devices and file folders. Eleanor selected a specific drive and inserted it into one of the terminals. Screen filled with names, photographs, and classified documents. Jamie recognized some of the faces: senators, generals, foreign ministers, business leaders. All of them marked with dates and brief descriptions. Target eliminated. Mission successful. No evidence recovered. Agent Kim was reading over Eleanor's shoulder, her expression growing more shocked with each entry. "These are all people who died in the past 15 years. Car accidents, heart attacks, random crimes." "None of them were random," Eleanor said quietly. "Every death served someone's political or financial interests. And every elimination was authorized by officials who thought they could use the program for their own purposes." Torres found an entry that made him stop. Senator Patricia Hawkins. She died in a car accident 3 years ago. But according to this, she was eliminated because she was investigating illegal arms sales to foreign militias. Eleanor nodded. Senator Hawkins discovered that Harrison was using program resources to eliminate people who threatened his private business interests. She was going to expose him, so he had her killed and made it look like an accident. But Harrison was supposed to be dead by then, Agent Kim pointed out. Harrison has been operating through intermediaries for 12 years. Shell companies, private contractors, former intelligence assets who owed him favors. The Kozlov Group is just his most recent front organization. Eleanor copied several files to a portable drive, then began uploading others to an encrypted server. "I'm sending copies to investigative journalists, congressional oversight committees, and international law enforcement agencies. Even if Harrison kills all of us, this information will eventually surface." The facility's alarm system suddenly activated, filling the corridors with flashing red lights and a mechanical voice announcing, "Unauthorized access detected. Facility lockdown initiated." Torres reached for his radio, but got only static. "They're jamming communications." Eleanor was already moving toward a weapons locker built into the office wall. Inside were items that looked more like art supplies than deadly weapons: ceramic knives, carbon fiber garrotes, polymer explosives disguised as everyday objects. "How many people is Harrison likely to send?" she asked, distributing weapons to Torres and Kim. "If he's using Omega Protocol authorization, probably 20 to 30 specialists," Torres replied, checking the unfamiliar weapon Eleanor had handed him. Eleanor smiled grimly. "Good. If he'd sent 50, we might be in trouble." Jamie stared at her. "You think 3 people can fight 30 trained killers?" "Not 3 people," Eleanor corrected. "1 specialist with 2 people providing support. And we're not fighting them, we're hunting them." She led them out of the office and down a corridor Jamie hadn't seen before. The walls here were lined with what appeared to be surveillance monitors, but the screens showed views of rooms throughout the facility from angles that suggested hidden cameras. "Advantage number 1, Eleanor said, pointing to the monitors. "I know this facility better than anyone Harrison could send. I trained here for 2 years, and I've memorized every room, every corridor, every ventilation shaft. Advantage number 2? Agent Kim asked. Eleanor activated a control panel that began sealing blast doors throughout the facility. "Harrison's people are expecting to face federal agents using conventional tactics. They're not expecting to face someone who knows how they think, how they move, how they kill." The lights in the corridor dimmed to emergency level, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "And advantage number 3, Eleanor continued, "is that they need me alive to access certain archive files, which means they can't use their most effective weapons." Torres was studying the surveillance monitors. "I count 12 hostiles on level 1, moving in standard sweep formation." Eleanor watched their movement patterns on the screens. 6 specialists, 6 support personnel. "Harrison's being cautious. He doesn't want to risk losing too many assets. If this goes wrong, how do we fight 6 specialists?" Jamie asked. Eleanor's smile was predatory. "We don't fight them. We separate them, isolate them, force them to face the 12 ways techniques individually instead of as a coordinated team." She activated another control system, and Jamie heard the sound of mechanical systems throughout the facility: ventilation fans stopping, airlocks sealing, elevator systems going offline. "I'm dividing the facility into isolated sections," Eleanor explained. "They came in as a team, but now they're going to die as individuals." On the surveillance monitors, Jamie could see Harrison's people reacting to the changing facility conditions. Their coordinated advance was breaking down as blast doors separated team members and communication systems failed. Eleanor was already moving, selecting a specific route through corridors that didn't appear on any of the surveillance screens. "Agent Torres, take Jamie to the medical facility on level 2. It has independent life support and communication systems." "Agent Kim, you're with me. Where are you going?" Torres asked. Eleanor checked the ceramic knife she had taken from the weapons locker. "I'm going to introduce Harrison's people to the 12 ways, starting with the ones who thought they could trap me in my own training facility." She disappeared into a maintenance access tunnel, leaving Torres and Jamie alone in the red-lit corridor. "Is she going to be okay?" Jamie asked. Torres looked at the surveillance monitors, where 2 of Harrison's specialists had just discovered that the elevator they had taken down was no longer responding to commands. "Jamie," he said quietly, "I think the question is whether Harrison's people are going to be okay." Eleanor moved through the ventilation system like a ghost, using maintenance tunnels that had been designed for emergency evacuation, but served equally well for hunting. Through the metal grating, she could see Harrison's people moving through the facility with professional caution, but they were operating in unfamiliar territory while she was in her natural element. The first specialist was examining a computer terminal in what had once been a classroom for psychological warfare techniques. He was alone, separated from his team when Eleanor had sealed the blast doors. Perfect. She dropped silently from a ceiling access panel behind him. The first way, lateral approach to the carotid artery. He was unconscious before he could turn. Around dead 30 seconds later. 1 down, 5 to go. The second specialist was more challenging, a woman who had positioned herself in a defensible corridor intersection, watching 3 different approaches. But she hadn't considered the fourth approach. From directly above, Eleanor used a maintenance cable to rappel down from the ceiling, landing behind her target in complete silence. The seventh way, blade between the second and third ribs, angled upward toward the heart. Death was instantaneous. 2 down. The third and fourth specialists were working together, systematically clearing rooms on the facility's second level. Eleanor watched them through hidden cameras, studying their movement patterns and communication methods. They were good, probably former military special forces who had been recruited into Harrison's private army, but they had never faced anyone trained in the 12 ways. Eleanor used the facility's internal communication system to her advantage, creating sounds that drew the specialists apart. When the third specialist investigated what sounded like footsteps in an empty training room, Eleanor was waiting. The ninth way, improvised projectile aimed at the temporal region. She used a weighted training dummy, swinging it with enough force to crush the specialist's skull against the concrete wall. 3 down. The fourth specialist realized he was alone and attempted to retreat toward the elevator. Eleanor anticipated this, using maintenance tunnels to reach the elevator shaft first. When the doors opened, she was waiting inside. The fifth way, pressure point manipulation causing temporary paralysis, followed by respiratory failure. She applied the technique with surgical precision, and the specialist dropped without making a sound. 4 down. The fifth specialist was the team leader, more experienced, more cautious, more dangerous. He had taken a defensive position in the facility's central security office, using the surveillance monitors to track Eleanor's movement through the corridors. But Eleanor knew something he didn't. The surveillance system had blind spots, zones that the cameras couldn't reach, designed to provide privacy for sensitive conversations between program administrators. She used these blind spots to approach the security office undetected, coming up through a floor access panel directly beneath his position. The third way, disruption of the diaphragm causing temporary paralysis of the breathing reflex, followed by manual strangulation. He never had a chance to call for help. 5 down, 1 to go. The sixth specialist was the most dangerous, a professional who had realized what was happening and adapted accordingly. Instead of trying to hunt Eleanor, he had taken a defensive position in the facility's main elevator lobby, between Eleanor and the only way out of the facility. Eleanor studied him through the surveillance cameras. He was positioned behind an overturned table, watching all approaches, weapon ready. Professional stance, excellent field of fire, minimal exposure to attack. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an excellent defensive position, but Eleanor Vance didn't use normal circumstances. She accessed the facility's fire suppression system, triggering a massive release of chemical fire retardant that filled the elevator lobby with thick, choking foam. The specialist was blinded and disoriented, unable to see or breathe clearly. Eleanor walked into the foam-filled room like an avenging angel, her movements sure and deadly despite the zero visibility. The 11th way, silent approach using environmental cover, followed by manual elimination techniques that leave no evidence. 6 down. Eleanor emerged from the foam-filled lobby, completely calm, her clothes barely disturbed. She had eliminated 6 trained killers in less than 20 minutes, using nothing but the environment around her and techniques that would leave no forensic evidence. Agent Kim, who had been watching on portable surveillance monitors, stared at her in amazement. "How did you do that?" Eleanor's smile was cold. I had 12 years to think about how I would kill Harrison's people if they ever found me. Turns out, I'm very good at long-term planning. She led Kim toward the medical facility where Torres and Jamie were waiting. But that was just the advance. Team, Harrison will send more people when they don't report back. The 12 Ways is a gripping espionage thriller that follows Eleanor Vance, a former government assassin who has spent 12 years living under the false identity of Margaret Chen, a quiet elderly woman working as a librarian. Her carefully constructed peaceful life is shattered when Russian operatives discover her true identity during what should have been an ordinary morning at her favorite café. Eleanor was once part of an elite, classified program called 12 Ways, a government assassination initiative that trained 27 specialists in 12 different methods of killing without detection. Created with the noble intention of eliminating threats that conventional law enforcement couldn't handle, the program was designed to protect national security by targeting drug lords, arms dealers, war criminals, and other dangerous individuals who had escaped traditional justice. The program was founded by Marcus Webb, a patriotic intelligence officer who believed in serving his country with honor and integrity. Under Webb's leadership, the 12 Ways specialists operated within moral boundaries, targeting only those who posed genuine threats to American security. Eleanor became one of the program's most skilled operatives, capable of eliminating targets with deadly efficiency while leaving no trace of her involvement. However, the program's integrity was gradually corrupted by James Harrison, an ambitious intelligence director who saw the specialists as tools for advancing his personal agenda. Over time, Harrison began using the program to eliminate political opponents, investigative journalists, and business rivals, anyone who threatened his growing power and influence within the intelligence community. 12 years before the main events of the story, Marcus Webb discovered Harrison's corruption and planned to expose the illegal operations. Webb had compiled extensive evidence of Harrison's crimes, including documentation of unauthorized assassinations and financial records, showing how Harrison had diverted program resources for personal gain. But before Webb could present his evidence to congressional oversight committees, Harrison had him murdered, making it appear to be a random robbery. With Webb dead and the evidence seemingly destroyed, Harrison began systematically eliminating the 12 Ways specialists, claiming they had become security risks who needed to be cleaned up before they could expose classified operations. Eleanor went underground, creating the identity of Margaret Chen and disappearing into civilian life. For 12 years she lived quietly, believing she was the only surviving specialist and that her former life was buried forever. As Margaret Chen, Eleanor found something she had never experienced during her years as an assassin: genuine human connection. Working as a librarian and frequenting a small cafe near her apartment, she developed a friendship with Jamie Thompson, a 20-year-old college student who worked as a barista. Jamie showed kindness to the woman she believed to be a lonely elderly customer, always remembering her coffee preferences and checking on her well-being. This friendship became the most meaningful relationship of Eleanor's life, teaching her the difference between merely surviving and actually living. Through Jamie's simple acts of human kindness, Eleanor began to understand what she had been missing during her years as a government weapon. Eleanor's peaceful existence ends abruptly when 3 Russian operatives enter the cafe where she's having her regular morning coffee with Jamie. The Russians have somehow discovered her true identity and location, intending to capture or eliminate her to prevent her knowledge of their operations from being used against them. In a matter of minutes, Eleanor is forced to abandon her Margaret Chen persona and return to being the deadly specialist she once was. Using techniques from the 12 Ways program, she eliminates all 3 operatives with lethal efficiency, but not before one of them reveals that Harrison is still alive and actively hunting the remaining specialists. The confrontation at the café exposes Eleanor's true identity to Jamie and draws the attention of federal agents. including FBI Agent Torres and Agent Kim, who arrive to investigate what appears to be a terrorist attack. Eleanor realizes that her cover is blown and that Harrison will now stop at nothing to eliminate her and anyone who might have evidence of his crimes. With her peaceful life destroyed, Eleanor must protect Jamie while evading both Harrison's assassination teams and federal law enforcement. She discovers that Harrison has spent 12 years building a network of corrupt officials and private contractors, using government resources to maintain his power while systematically eliminating any threats to his position. Eleanor learns that Harrison has been running unauthorized operations for years, conducting assassinations and other illegal activities without congressional oversight or official authorization. He has been using the 12 Ways program's techniques and resources for personal gain, eliminating business rivals, political opponents, and anyone who threatens to expose his corruption. The stakes become personal when Harrison threatens to kill Jamie and everyone else who has helped Eleanor, including her elderly neighbors and casual acquaintances from her life as Margaret Chen. This threat transforms Eleanor's mission from simple survival to a quest for justice, not just for herself, but for all the innocent people Harrison has murdered and threatened over the years. As Eleanor fights to stay ahead of Harrison's hunters, she gains unexpected allies in Agent Torres and Agent Kim, federal investigators who recognize that Eleanor is not the real threat. These agents help her access the archive, a secret collection of evidence that Marcus Webb had compiled before his death, documenting Harrison's crimes in meticulous detail. The archive contains 12 years of documentation showing how Harrison corrupted the 12 Ways program, including records of unauthorized assassinations, financial evidence of personal enrichment, and proof that Harrison ordered Marcus Webb's murder. This evidence is the key to exposing Harrison's crimes and bringing him to justice through legal channels rather than assassination. Eleanor realizes that simply killing Harrison would solve nothing. It would only perpetuate the cycle of violence and secrecy that has defined her life for so long. Instead, she decides to expose the truth publicly, forcing accountability through transparency rather than through the shadows where Harrison has operated for so long. The story builds to a climactic confrontation in Washington, D.C., where Eleanor uses her knowledge of government facilities and emergency protocols to stay ahead of Harrison's forces while uploading the archive evidence to news organizations and congressional oversight committees. Eleanor's plan culminates with a public challenge to Harrison, a final confrontation on the roof of the Hart Senate office building, broadcast live to the world by news helicopters. This public setting ensures that Harrison cannot eliminate Eleanor quietly or stage her death as an accident, as he has done with so many others. The rooftop battle between Eleanor and Harrison represents more than just a physical confrontation between two skilled operatives. It symbolizes the conflict between Harrison's philosophy of operating without accountability and Eleanor's newfound belief in justice and transparency. Harrison represents the corruption of good intentions. A man who began with legitimate goals, but gradually lost his moral compass in pursuit of power and control. He believes that national security justifies any action, no matter how illegal or immoral, and that the public is too naive to understand the harsh realities of intelligence work. Eleanor, transformed by her years of civilian life and her friendship with Jamie, represents the possibility of redemption and the importance of human connection. She has learned that protecting people is more important than protecting secrets, and that true security comes from accountability and justice rather than from operating in shadows. In the end, Eleanor chooses not to kill Harrison, instead capturing him alive and turning him over to federal authorities for prosecution. This decision represents her complete transformation from a government weapon into a person who believes in legal justice and democratic accountability. The story concludes with Eleanor testifying before Congress about the 12 Ways program and Harrison's corruption. Her public testimony helps dismantle the network of corrupt officials and ensures that similar programs will be subject to proper oversight in the future. Eleanor's testimony is not just an expose of government corruption. It's also a meditation on the nature of service, loyalty, and justice. She explains that while intelligence work is necessary for national security, it must be conducted within legal boundaries and with accountability to the American people. 6 months later, Eleanor Vance sat in a congressional hearing room facing a panel of senators investigating the 12 Ways program. The cameras rolled as she delivered her final testimony, her voice steady and clear. "The program was created to protect innocent people," she said, looking directly into the lens. "But it became a weapon against them. That ends today." Harrison had been sentenced to life without parole. The archive's revelations had triggered the largest intelligence reform in decades, with new oversight protocols ensuring no director could ever again operate without accountability. Eleanor glanced at the gallery where Jamie sat, no longer the young, frightened college student, but a confident young woman who had testified about the importance of ordinary citizens in holding their government accountable. Agent Torres and Kim sat beside her. They had received commendations for their role in exposing the conspiracy. After the hearing, Eleanor walked outside into the Washington sunlight. A reporter approached with a microphone. "Ms. Vance, what's next for you?" Eleanor smiled, the genuine smile she had learned during her years as Margaret Chen. "I'm going home. To my real life. The one where I serve coffee and help people with their library books and remember what it means to be human." "Any regrets about the past 12 years?" Eleanor thought about Marcus Webb, about the specialists who had died, about the victims of Harrison's corruption. Then she thought about Jamie's kindness, about the simple pleasure of a morning routine, about choosing connection over isolation. "None," she said firmly, "because those years taught me the difference between existing and living." As she walked away from the cameras, Eleanor pulled out her phone and called the corner café. "Jamie, it's Eleanor. Save me a cup of coffee. I'm coming home." Thank you for joining Eleanor Vance on her journey from the shadows to the light. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption, justice, and the power of human connection, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories that explore what it truly means to be human. Your support helps us bring you the compelling narratives that matter most.